All right, we are live from sort of from One More Page. Our weird times. I'm Amber Taylor. I'm the events coordinator at One More Page Books, and I want to welcome everybody here tonight for joining us this evening in Arlington, although it seems we have people from across the country, so whatever time zone you're in, we welcome you. So pre-COVID-19, we had planned to have Judith Martin, Miss Manners, at our store. And we're so glad that even though we can't be together in person, that we were still able to do this and actually be able to broaden the audience and have people from Washington State, Wisconsin. We even have someone, I believe, joining us from Canada tonight. So welcome to our store here in Arlington, Virginia. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to do quick introductions, and then I'm going to hand the virtual mic over to Judith Martin and Bethanne Patrick. One quick technical note, you all did get an email from me that included my email address to send advanced questions. We have those. We'll work through those tonight, but if anyone else has a question, feel free to type it into the comments on YouTube, and I will be gathering those during the event this evening. So we're so happy that Bethanne Patrick was able to be part of this event tonight too. Bethanne's a writer, author, literary critic whose monthly book column runs in the Washington Post. She's also a very good friend of our store, so we're glad she's here tonight. She reviews books in the Washington Post, LA Times, at NPR Books, and in columns for LitHub and Virtuoso magazine. Bethanne also created the popular Friday Reads hashtag, which many of us read and check every week. And she promotes the love of books and reading wherever and whenever possible. You can find her on Twitter at The Book Maven. And Bethanne will be leading the conversation tonight with Judith Martin, or as many of you know her as Miss Manners. As you know, she writes the Miss Manners column, which is distributed 6 times weekly and carried in more than 200 newspapers and digital outlets in the United States and abroad. Readers send Miss Manners not only their table and party etiquette questions, but questions involving more complicated aspects of life: romance, work, family relationships, child rearing, death. And in September of 2013, Mrs. Martin was joined by her 2, I see it on your website as your 2 perfect children. So that's wonderful that you have perfect children. So Nicholas and Jacobina are co-writers of the Miss Manners column now. And Miss Manners Judith is also a novelist, journalist, and frequent lecturer and guest on national television and radio shows. As a reporter, feature writer, and critic, she spent 25 years at the Washington Post, where she was one of the original members of the Style and Weekend sections. And in addition to 2 novels, she's written numerous Miss Manners books, including the one we're here to talk about tonight. Also, happy release day. It's your release day for this title. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Bethanne. And Bethanne, I'd also love for you to mention your book and the connection with Miss Manners during that.
Thank you, Amber. So thrilled to be here. And I will tell you about that book in a moment. But first, I want to say, hello, Miss Manners. It is lovely to see you. And because we go way back, I don't have to say, how do you do?
We do, yes.
We do. And one of the things Amber mentioned is you were kind enough, and as a member of the etiquette world, the doyenne, we might say, you were kind enough to write the introduction to my 2011 National Geographic book, An Uncommon History of Common Courtesy, which was in no way competition for your books, but I still am really appreciative of that and delighted to see you again here with a new book.
Well, your book was a wonderful addition to the literature on this noble subject.
It is a noble subject. And so etiquette is something that to some of our audience members, maybe not too many since they are here, they want to hear from you, but it is something that some people out in the world today think has lost its importance. And you and I know it has only gained in importance. And so your new book, which I want to show off, Minding Miss Manners in an Age of Fake Etiquette, is a beautiful volume that has a lot of great information in it. But I'm wondering first, what spurred you to write a new book, especially one with the words fake etiquette in the title?
Well, I had no sooner finished this book, which is about the rotten habits that the society had gotten into out of greed, out of laziness, out of many other things, often prompted by commercial interests involving getting money out of people. And when these things suddenly disappeared because of the virus. And so while I put out a small ebook about by immediate behavior about in this time of the lockdown and the, this is a book about let's not go back to those terrible habits. I had a bad case of be careful what you wish for, having just decried the commercialization of hospitality, bloated weddings, trying to get money out of people, all those things, when they disappeared. And I thought, I didn't mean like that. Life will be back. I felt a little bit like a child who says, wouldn't it be nice to be an orphan and free? And then the parents die. And you think, I'm responsible. No, these are the things that we should be thinking over now and not going back to. Simple example, we see real neediness now. And the habits that solvent people had gotten into of demanding cash and presents from other people, encouraging them to give to the greedy rather than the needy. I think economic hard times will make people think twice about that. The weddings during this time are extremely touching. They're what people say they want weddings to be, personal and intimate. And those big bloated weddings, which are all the same, are not that. But these have been because people realize that the important thing is the ceremony and whatever sharing that is possible in these times. Hospitality, people are home cooking now. Maybe they'll cook for their friends and not ask them to bring the food, and maybe the friends will appreciate it and not refuse to answer invitations or show up with extra people or whatever. So this is a time to think, okay, we're not doing these things right now because we can't, but we will be able to. And do we want to go back to those really abrasive, unpleasant?
I agree with you there, Miss Manners, because we actually attended a Zoom wedding just a couple of months ago. I'm not sure if we've got a video problem.
I am not sure either. Oh, there she is.
There we go. There we go. I'm not sure if you heard me, Miss Manners. I was just saying my family and I attended a Zoom wedding in March, and it was everything that you just said. Aside from the technology side of things, which was very easy, it was simple, it was lovely, it was about the connection between the two people getting married instead of about the pomp and the money and the everything, the sort of circus that weddings have become to some extent.
We've had a little trouble with the audio. I'm sorry. Can you, you went to a wedding
that was online.
I'm sorry.
Oh no. Oh dear. It was
online. Yes. Well, people are, but they're realizing that actually, the word wedding had become disconnected from the act of getting married. There were married people who said, well, we really never had a wedding. Yes, you did. You got married. And finally, understand that is the important thing. It's very nice to celebrate as best you can. But the show
dear.
memorable. These beautiful little ceremonies having in their backyards with their friends at a distance or online, are really what is memorable and touching. Now,
Yes.
I'm not saying we don't want to go back to in-person things, but it's a time to think what's important.
That is true. One of the things that you're bringing up in talking about people asking for money, things like asking for gift cards for wedding gifts, it's about entitlement, isn't it?
Well, that's incredibly vulgar, and it's part of a huge problem of greed, of people ask at any opportunity for money and to have other people go out, take their shopping lists, and buy them what they've decided they wanted, which is what is known as gift registry. The idea that you, because you're getting married or you're having a baby or you're graduating or so on, you can tell other people how to spend their money, has ruined the charm of giving presents, which is all about people thinking, well, I'd like to please these people, and I'll try and think what would please them instead of just taking their shopping and going ahead and sending something. But it's spread to people who want fancy vacations, who want to buy fancy things, who are asking others to fund it. Well, there's real need in the society now.
Yes.
If you have philanthropic opportunities, that's the place to put them. And I would hope people would realize that.
I would hope so as well. And one of the things I always say that people don't realize how funny you are. And we can talk about that in a minute. But I also don't think people realize how much of your very good advice is based not on which fork to use. In fact, very little of it is based on which fork to use. It's based on knowing that you need to speak up sometimes, knowing that you can't simply sit in silence when someone does something rude. And that includes, and I think it's important for us to say this because of what our country's going through recently, that includes when someone makes a rude comment on someone based on their race, on their sexual orientation, on just who they are as a person. And you actually encourage people in your column and in your books to say, no, I don't care for that. Or no, I am not going to come to that particular meeting you want me to go to. It's about really knowing your boundaries. And that is something I don't think people understand about Miss Manners.
Well, there are certain pejorative preconceptions. The which fork thing is one of them because ritual is a part of manners. Yeah. And I hope you do use the fork and not your fingers when you're eating spaghetti. But the other one is that it's, just a matter of making everybody feel comfortable, which means, letting people walk all over you. There are polite ways to say no. There are polite ways to disassociate yourself from unpleasant opinions and statements. Of course, I mean, if it were letting people walk all over you, even I wouldn't be in favor of it. Good Lord. But, there are polite ways to do things and there are rude ways to do things. One of the big problems now, for instance, you're referring to the present situation, is vigilante etiquette cops. Are all the time telling people that they shouldn't eat this or that they're wrong about this or that. But one of the questions is, how do you confront people who are not obeying the rules? The principle that they should need to learn is that if you shame people in public, they don't change. It's not effective. They fight back and they get worse. So you find a face-saving way to say to someone who's moving in too close, I better keep my distance. I wouldn't want to risk infecting you. And you move back. You don't say, don't you come near me with your rotten germs. who are, well, one of the is people who don't wash their hands in public restrooms. And I said, well, here I can't really think of a polite way to say, I'm watching your bathroom behavior and it's really disgusting. So I invited people in, and they did wrote in with wonderful things like, oh, look, free soap and water. Or this basin is free now. You can take it, and so on. So they got into the spirit of things, of face-saving ways of calling people out. But yes, if you say everything, you're going to be in big trouble.
Well, one person asked, and I think this is relevant to what we're talking about right now. She said, is there a polite way to protest injustice? And should there be? Because she said, manners, she's always been taught, are about making the other person feel comfortable. But doesn't making people feel comfortable in times of social injustice defeat the purpose of protest?
And that's not what manners are all about. It's all very well in its way, but there are times when you want to make people feel uncomfortable because they're standing on your foot or whatever, or are standing on injustice. How do people protest social injustice? They're doing it right now in the streets in a peaceful, respectful way. And yes, you have to make those points, but you don't do it by yelling at people and shaming them. You do it by civil disobedience. The word civil is very important there.
Well, and I think that's also very important. What does civility mean today? Does it mean the same thing it always has? Should it mean the same thing that it always has? How do you define it? Because you are the expert.
Well, the principles are the same. Justice, kindness, and empathy, and things like that. Obviously, surface behavior changes all the time. And I am not one to say, oh, let's go back to when things were perfect, because we all know they never were. We're trying to improve things, and we all have, I hope, a little hope for the future. But the civility is the basic bargain that we make, that we all want freedom, and yet we want a livable society. So the bargain is that I will restrain some of my more repulsive impulses so that you don't exercise your repulsive impulses in my face. We'll get along because we both want a peaceful society. But it's a tension between personal freedom, which we all believe in, and livable society. And it requires a little bit of restraint.
It does require a little bit of restraint. And one of the things, I'm looking at my questions because this just delighted me, and this is moving away a little bit from our current relevant topics, but it's still important. You have a brilliant response to the age-old question of, does this blank make me look fat? And that could be, does this dress make me look fat, etc. And I thought the reason I love the response and wanted you to share it a little bit with us is that we all know what it means to make what we call a social fib, to maintain social honor. And so would you talk a little bit about answering that question?
Well, it depends on the circumstances. I mean, if you and I are shopping and I try on a dress and I say, does this make me look fat? You can say yes, but I won't buy it. But if I show a party wearing a dress and I'm foolish enough to ask such a question, the answer is, you look lovely. I don't know the particular answer you were saying that I have said, but it's you're asking for reassurance. This is in that case. It's not a literal question of do I look fat, and maybe it's not the dress's fault. Maybe
that was your answer. That was your answer, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, because the woman, or could have been a man, writing in said, so and so has asked me if she looks fat in this dress, and the truth is, yes, but it's not the dress making her look fat. And you said, well, in that case, when she says, does this dress make me look fat? You can safely say no.
Exactly. It's what you've been eating all along that makes you look fat.
So yes, exactly. So there are some things like that answer that simply do not need improving. For example, we're here being hosted by a bookstore. Many of us believe that the book is a perfect tool. You and I both clearly have them in our homes behind us tonight in our shelves. There are some things in etiquette that don't need to be changed. Isn't that so? And if so, what are a few of them that you believe will never change?
Well, as I say, the principles. I make a distinction between etiquette and manners. Manners are the principles, and those are eternal. And for those of people who are out there who are lawyers, it's like the difference between natural law and positive law. Etiquette is the particular rituals of a society or a subsection of the society and so on, and they change all the time. But although I hope slowly and with some reason and grace, and people do not get to change those for themselves. That's one of the things I deal with in this book, that part of the fake etiquette is coming from commerce that tells you that if you're getting married, you have to buy thousands of dollars worth of useless, vulgar things. But it's also coming from selfish people who announce that, oh, nobody cares if you answer invitations anymore. Well, no, only hosts care. Or you don't need to thank people anymore. That's a popular one, which I find extremely strange in an era and coming from people who expect, if they post a picture of their lunch, to have everybody press like and respond and give feedback. You can't buy a tube of toothpaste at the drugstore without them asking you, how was your experience? So the idea that people who are generous and kind should have a little feedback should not be that strange. But those, as I say, things change, but I'm in charge of change because I don't trust the lopsided change that people announce out of selfish reasons.
It's true that people often act selfishly when they want something to change, and they will do anything. We've seen, they'll do anything to make that change work for them. We've seen that, unfortunately, at very high levels in our nation. I'm trying to be diplomatic, of course, but etiquette, as you said, is different from manners. And why is it still important for us to have etiquette? Why is it important, aside from, the natural law, as you might say, of society, where we do have these unchanging principles? Why is it important that we still have a system that may be based on a hierarchy, on a ranking? Because I think many people in this country right now say, why do we have those things? They don't work. They don't serve us. Why should we have them? And they don't understand, perhaps, that something's going to take its place. There's going to be, as you were just saying a few minutes ago, Miss Manners, there's always going to be etiquette in a society, even a society that is a completely different government or ethical system than our own.
Yes, it's the language of human behavior, and it enables you to read people's intentions and to participate in emotionally fulfilling ceremonies, whether it's weddings or funerals or such. But you need a language like that. And when you say, talk about a hierarchy, indeed, there are times where it is wrong and it should be gotten rid of. This country was founded on the idea that the founding fathers, who were specifically interested in etiquette, knew the etiquette of court society in Europe and didn't want it here because we have equality. So that was one of the first things they did. All men are created equal. Forgot about the women. They forgot about a few other people. But was, yes, we try to level hierarchy. There are places where hierarchy is necessary. You want to know at work who's the boss and who's the intern, because you probably want to take your directions from the boss rather than the intern. But in private life, in theory, we are equal. That's not always in practice. But if there are unpleasant inequalities, we try to change them.
So we're not bound by etiquette to keep things that are unjust. I think that's very important. That's a very important thing that people need to hear now.
Yes. I mean, there is change and there is progress. Hard to see sometimes. But indeed, when people talk about how, oh, everybody used to behave, they didn't take a good look at it. Etiquette was very elaborate toward people in power. Women, depending on, had certain privileges if they were in certain brackets. Others were treated miserably. People of color were treated miserably. It was considered that etiquette only applied within certain groups.
Right.
And I hope and understanding that one of the big pushes of the last few decades has been to extend courtesy to more people who traditionally did not have it.
I think that's fascinating to. Sorry.
Etiquette is on the side of the powerless, because without it, you have might makes right, and you have people who can walking all over other people. And if there are requirements that, no, you have to treat everybody with respect, we don't always live up to, obviously, but those are the requirements of etiquette.
I think it's fascinating to note that you, as Judith Martin, have a long history as a journalist, and that your work at the Washington Post, especially before you became Miss Manners and became a columnist, was actually groundbreaking in its opening up pages to women and what was once considered just women's interests. I would love to hear from you a bit about that, because I think you were a pioneer in some ways.
I worked for the women's section, which preceded the style section,
Yes.
which of course I also, but the idea that these things were only of interest to women was not thought by we women who worked there. We had a fat editor and a lot of very excellent reporters and writers who couldn't get jobs otherwise. I mean, they were in the women's section because there were jobs there, and we made something of it. The Washington Post women's section, when I worked there, covered the anti-war movement before, because it was a women's strike for peace, if you go way back. That's how.
Yes.
Before the rest of the section did, rest of the paper did. We covered the feminist movement, which was treated as a joke elsewhere, but we things, and we made. I mean, it was an excellent section. Was there a little foolishness and celebrity stuff there? Yes, but not as much as there is now in the mainline press. And it was a very good section. We always felt constrained by the fact that it was called for and about women. The idea was that only women eat, so food was totally for women. Only women go to parties. Only women have babies. All those things. And when they finally dawned on them that, no, maybe this is something for all of humanity, then they started the style section. And it was the women reporters who largely staffed that, along with the people from the entertainment section. And it was a big step in American journalism.
It was a big step in American journalism. I have a column now that runs in the style section because of the women's section, you know, that you were such an important part of. And that, I think that's an important thing in talking about what we're saying, that etiquette is for everyone. It is not simply for people who are raised in specific kinds of households or who have specific kinds of roles in society. It is something, a thank you note can be a very simple piece, a very simple sentiment written on a piece of notebook paper by a child. It doesn't have to be an elegant filigreed card.
Well, the expression of gratitude is something that we should have be learning right this minute. People applauding on the streets for frontline workers,
Yes.
people thanking the delivery people who are risking themselves to bring you stuff. Gratitude, yes, the expression of gratitude is extremely important. It's what keeps people going who are of enormous benefit to us all.
I do want to mention your smaller book about manners in a time of contagion, and that is that available as an ebook only right now?
Yes, that's just an ebook.
That's
Yes.
but you have a wonderful. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say you have very specific advice about tipping a food delivery person, for example. And the advice is less specific than the sentiment, which is why I wanted to mention that, because you said you should be quite grateful to someone who is delivering food to you in a difficult time like this. Be gracious, be generous. I thought that was
Yes.
a wonderful way to put it.
Yes. It's again, it's another form of expression of gratitude. I'm not generally in favor of the tipping system because I think people ought to be paid and ought to expect to be paid in full.
Yes.
When you and I have a bad day, we don't get our money docked, but it's there, and people depend on it. And if they are taking bigger risks, the gratitude ought to be all the more.
So there are ways that, as you were saying earlier in our conversation, that we can make things better even now, even though many of us want big societal change, and hopefully that will come, but it takes time. Right now, we can make things better for people. What happens when you have something that gets in the way of normal etiquette? For example, you want to thank someone, but they're in quarantine or they're unavailable, and you know that sending them a letter might not be welcome because they're in a hospital that is worried about the mail, for example.
Thank goodness we have this technology now.
Yes.
It would be much more difficult if we did not. But it's the importance of etiquette at this time is greatly in expressing gratitude, but it's also in getting along. I mean, people are quarantined, and they often have said, I get this all the time, I want to be myself at home, and they never mean their good self. They mean Slavic root. And if you're going to be quarantined with members of your family, you should not subscribe to the idea that you don't need manners at home, because life is going to get extremely unpleasant when you can't get away. So this is not a luxury, manners. It is a necessity for human beings to get along with one another.
It is a necessity. I want to make sure that I get to some of the questions that we've got that were already sent in before we open up to questions from people who are watching us. And I have plenty of other things to talk about as well. But one person had several questions about, again, the current events. And the first one is, Dear Miss Manners, what is the most polite way to explain to people who don't believe in social distancing that one is practicing it without hurting their feelings?
Back up. You don't want to confront them. You want to get away from them, right?
Yes.
Excuse me. I will endanger you. It's not go away, you monster. It's as I said before, a face-saving way of retreating.
I heard someone, this was a real story from a friend a few weeks ago, saying that a woman came into a supermarket in front of her and deliberately sneezed over all of the fresh produce. Now, that is more of a question for her doctor. But
no, it's a question for the store. I mean,
yes,
when you have total scofflaw, there is no sweet little way you can nudge people to be more polite. That person should be arrested.
and I think some people
Deliberately speaking danger to the society. So
yeah.
that we do make a distinction between law and etiquette. And etiquette can't say, "Oh, that's not very nice to sneeze on the vegetables."
Right.
The something radical has to be done.
Now, here's another one, again, on a topical matter. Dear Miss Manners, what is your suggestion for Black Lives Matter protesters to convince those who don't understand why a person would be supporting the cause without getting into an argument? And I'm not sure if that's it.
If you're in a protest, you presume that people agree with you. Are you talking about confrontation between two protest groups?
No,
or?
I think the question is, you're going to protest regularly, and let's say you have a friend, a family member, a colleague who does not agree with the movement or the protests. How do you explain what you're doing without getting into an argument?
That you believe in it, and you say why. People have forgotten how to have civil arguments and discussions.
Yes.
By telling people that they're stupid and misguided, you don't change them. Sometimes you can't change them anyway. But if you can point out why you're doing this, and if you can make a case, if you're talking about a friend, you said, they presumably respect you, and they should listen to your opinions, and you should listen to theirs. And you ought to be able, if you're on the side of right, you ought to be able to convince them. But again, with politeness and respect, because insulting people just makes them more entrenched.
Civil discourse, as you said, is something we seem to have lost track on all sides. We've lost track of how to have an argument without turning it into an altercation.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, sorry.
There are times when it's not worth arguing with somebody who's not going to change. I bless the people who are explaining their positions and trying to do this. But I'm thinking of things like a family situation with a crotchety relative who's going to make bigoted remarks.
Yes.
I suppose you could say, I've always thought we have some mixed race in this family. I'm going to chase it down. Because these characteristics that you're complaining about, I've seen them in some of our family members. Worth a try.
I said earlier I was going to talk more about how funny you are. And I think that although having met you, I believe you are naturally funny. And I also know that you are very humorous as a writer. I think you also understand, especially from what you just told us, about the use of humor to diffuse very scary situations. And again, not saying that we need to use humor during a protest. There are things that aren't about making people comfortable, but humor can be used in a discussion with a friend or a family member, and it can save the situation, especially for you. You can walk away knowing you didn't insult somebody. You can walk away knowing you weren't unkind.
Mm-hmm. You can make a bargain. If you don't ask me why we're not going to get married, I won't ask you why you feel the way you do about the current situation. There's such not dealing with things, when it's hopeless. I mean, I'm all for when you can change people, but situations where it's going to be hopeless.
That is true. Next question is, dear Miss Manners, how would it be most polite for a non-African American to discuss with others why a non-Black person would be involved in the cause without appropriating or sounding insincere?
all you need to say is, because you're right.
There you go.
I agree, you're right.
Now, what about I think this is a great question. This person is asking about someone who supports peaceful change. How can they politely decline to kneel? How to deal with the national anthem and the American flag? If someone is really involved in the cause, should they kneel? How do they make that determination?
Excuse me, but that is an individual decision and people should respect it.
So it's up to that person to decide.
Not pushing people down around to kneel. You should not be slapping them to stand up and respectfully. There are various respectful ways of dealing with it, and that's up to the individual to decide.
Absolutely.
There's a little bit too much policing other people's behavior going on here. That's my job.
Don't take it away from Miss Manners. Absolutely not. Now, I do have other questions, but Amber, I wanted to ask if there's someone who's got a question in the audience so that we can get a few of those in before I move on to these other questions.
Yes. Is there any chance you can see that coming up on the screen on your side? Do you see the comments button?
Live comments, yes.
So there are a couple questions.
Oh my goodness, we've got lots. Excellent. Wonderful. Okay, so we've got a question from Ellen Claire Lamb, who asks, which social custom do you wish would return, Miss Manners, and which are you happiest to see abandoned?
Oh boy, that's a question. What would I like to return? A lot of simple courtesies, answering invitations, thanking people, allowing other people to proceed, and so on. Just simple orderliness so that in everyday life we don't get into these abrasive situations. And what am I glad to see the end of? All the things that put other people down. And when they do it in the name of etiquette, I am horrified because it is the opposite.
That is a very true thing. And I think, again, more people need to pay attention to the fact that putting people down or making them feel less than is absolutely the opposite of etiquette. Absolutely. On the subject of protest, asks Gary Holtzman, there has been a lot of attention paid recently to the importance of white people calling out the racism of other white people. And I think we've covered this a little bit, but he does ask, what's the best way to do this? So what's the best way if someone says, let's say, I don't want to say it's innocent, but they make a remark, something that they probably said 100 times before, and they say it in your presence, and you think, I can't put up with this. We talked about humor, but what's the most polite way to?
I think I'm a little shocked. I always thought of you as a fair person. Why do you do this? Put them on the spot and let them explain it, and it's going to disappear when they have to. This is casual bigotry, which, as you point out, is very common. But when you start making people accountable for it, they realize sometimes.
Right. I always thought of you as a fair person. I'm surprised. That is there we go. That is an excellent way. Now I am trying to figure out how to navigate these live comments. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing. Here we go. Lots of people are just saying thank you. Betsy Anderson says, your book, Guide to Excruciatingly Correct Behavior, brought joy and humor as well as good advice through my 40-year diplomatic career. That's wonderful because, of course, being a diplomat is all about etiquette and tact and manners. Celeste Gantz says, I can't tell you how often I refer to Miss Manners, not to correct a table setting, but the no-nonsense responses to, am I being a jerk? She doesn't hesitate to say, yes, you are. That's wonderful. And I just want to point out, Celeste is here from Sonoma County in California. So we really are reaching around the country and talking to people tonight. It's just wonderful. Now, I do have a question from Joanne, and I want to ask this because something I know from having spoken to you over the years is that your second home is Venice, Italy, and you have a great love for that beautiful, beautiful city, La Serenissima. And Joanne says, Venice has been open again for less than 2 weeks to visitors. In that time, the tourists have picnicked on ancient stones, gone sunbathing on the Fondamenta, and jumped into the Grand Canal for a swim. It's not only illegal, it's dangerous. How should Venice and her citizens dissuade rude behavior from tourists?
They have been trying in every way possible. I'm just glad the people who jumped into the canal were not drunk American teenagers. They were middle-aged. And the people sunbathing around town in swimsuits, people seem to think it's a resort. It's a city. We're from the Veneto because they're not allowing Americans in now. Mm-hmm. But they have, poor Venice, we had the ultra high water in November, and again when I was there in December. Then they had low water, and then they got virulent cases of the virus, and they're just beginning to get back on their feet. The economy is, of course, based on tourism, and mm-hmm. people are trying to think how can they refine that so the entire economy is not based on tourism, and that it's not the unprofitable tourism of day trippers who come in, leave garbage around, but don't mm-hmm. spend any money in the place. Or the cruise ships where they eat and sleep on the ship and add nothing to the economy, just crowd the street, trying to attract people. There are police who go around with signs that say respect Venice, and they beg people to behave better. But I think the answer will be when they have other sources of income. There are wonderful artisans or art restorers. They could go back into shipbuilding, I would hope. When there are other sources, then they can limit the non-profitable and frankly disruptive tourism. But I mean, I am a tourist, so I'm always saying, and the Venetians will say, well, you're not. Of course I'm a tourist. I'm a foreigner, and I come there because I love the sights. But, people seem to think that when they're on vacation, they're invisible and they can behave badly. It's a kind of extension of people who think that when they're in their cars, they can behave badly because nobody can see them. Except cars have windows. And people take pictures of you when you're behaving badly abroad. And those pictures go all over the world. We do see you. We do. It's a question of trying to encourage the tourism on the part of people who are really interested in Venice, mm-hmm. and not simply wandering through for a few hours and dropping garbage.
From Jeff, in the past few months, we have seen live on nationwide TV a phenomenon I have experienced before, that you are at a public event on stage with your boss and he makes an outrageous or significantly false statement. How should you act at that time? I'm not sure what he's talking about at all.
I'm sure what he's talking about. And his answer should be very familiar to those of you who live in the Washington area. I'm sure you've heard it before. You say, excuse me, sir, maybe I better clarify what you said. I don't want people to misunderstand you. They think, it's not that you said the sky is green. You know the sky is blue, but you're contrasting it to the grass. So people should understand that. And with any luck, your boss will thank you a lot later.
With any luck. I'm sorry, Jeff. I don't think we can fix this situation for you, but here are a couple of questions about clarify. That's right. Judith, another person with a wonderful name. I fell in love with your books for at least two reasons. First, the historic perspective you provided on various questions of etiquette, and two, the wittiness of your responses. In the beginning, did you receive any complaints about your witty answers?
Yes, not just the beginning. There are people who take everything, and humor does not go over well with those people. But I'm, sorry for anybody who isn't having that much fun in life. But what can you do?
Well, there is, as you say, etiquette is never more important than in trying times. And, we're certainly going through trying times right now. But in your witty answers, you have a way of lightening situations that are otherwise really heavy. And we've noted, as we've talked, that there are some things that can't be lightened. There are some things that you can't laugh at. And go ahead.
I don't justice. I assure you. Yes.
There are things you simply, cannot make funny. And so I'm wondering if you have ever gotten a question that you've had to answer absolutely straight, that you could not find a way to leaven with humor.
All the time.
All the time.
I mean, there are serious tragic situations. I mean, I love the human comedy, and when it lends itself to that, fine. But I do not make light of people's real difficulties. I'm not trying to find a way to. I mean, I'm not a comedian.
Right.
I hope that people enjoy the column, and I'm certainly giggling into my computer as I write most of it. But not that I'm making fun of everything. There are a great many things that should be treated, and I do treat seriously.
And there are things that you do treat seriously, but that also bring a great deal of joy. And so I have to ask, since we don't have questions right now coming in live, about your family, because you now have a new generation. You have grandchildren that have been born since the last time I saw you in person. And so you raised two excruciatingly correct and well-behaved children. And now you have grandchildren, two little girls, correct? One from Jacobina and one from your son, Nicholas?
Exactly. And they're a riot, but they're very polite little. One of them was writing me a letter to thank me for something once. And she put on the envelope Grammy and then put the address. And her mother said to her, envelopes are a little bit more formal. Mm-hmm. So she put Mrs. Grammy.
Mrs. Grammy. That's wonderful. That might be a title that would be even more delightful to have than Miss Manners.
Yes,
to be someone's Mrs. Grammy. Do they live nearby? Are you communicating?
They both live in Chicago, and right now we Zoom every day. We will do that this evening. And they often go to Venice with us, and they come here, and we go there. But I wish they did live here. Yes.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. But that is an excellent thing to ask you about, because what are their ages now?
8 and 9.
So an 8 and 9-year-old in Venice, traveling abroad. Are there challenges, or is it the same as having them visit you, normally?
No, it's much better, because you don't have to worry about them playing in traffic. We live on a little large campo, actually, where children play, and so they can play with other children, and they can run around. We don't have to worry because it's safe, and there's practically no crime in Venice. Not because people are more moral, but because there's impossible to make a getaway. So it's kind of heaven for children.
I do have some new questions that have come in. Adrian Tufts says, I work in our local school and I see awful behavior by parents in front of their children. That is difficult. How can I correct the parents without embarrassing them in front of their children?
You, as a teacher, you can correct the children, and the children will enjoy correcting the parents. I know for many years when my children were little, I was a president of the board of their school. And the parents seemed to expect us to teach manners. Well, a lot of them, few, I mean, not everybody, obviously, but there were parents who expected us to teach the children manners while they behaved rudely. Mm-hmm. Or who would, for the school it was competitive to get into because the public school system was not working very well and people wanted to be in private. And parents would teach their children to get into the kindergarten, teach them to read with flashcards and things like that. And we used to say, we'll teach them to read. We're a school. You teach them basic manners, and that's the ones we want. And they say, manners for 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds? We say, yeah, 5-year-old manners. Sit still for 5 minutes. Don't hit people when you're upset. Things like that. And we'll teach them the rest. You teach them that. So I hope we encourage it in that sense. But yes, I don't want to exaggerate the amount, but we did have our share of parents who behaved badly and yet expected us to discipline the children.
I love the idea of teachers and administrators and board members reminding parents that etiquette begins at home, manners begin at home. Those flashcards, those great artworks, those can be introduced later, but learning to say please and thank you is an early skill.
And it needs to be taught, not only taught at home, but it needs to be practiced at home.
Yes.
And that's the responsibility of teachers. Have enough burdens as it is without trying to make them do the basic child rearing.
That is very true. We do have one more from Celeste. Celeste, I love your enthusiasm. How do we tuck in a tag on the back of a blouse, remove a piece of fluff or a strand of hair from a shoulder, or indicate that there's something on the corner of a mouth politely? Or do we?
Well, of course, this is a question for when the virus is over. Don't go around tucking labels right now. You don't want to be.
Good idea.
The question is always, when they get home and look in the mirror, are they going to be horrified that they went that way all evening when there was something that could be done about it? So if you say, excuse me, you might have something on your tooth, the person can excuse him or herself and look in a mirror. If it's something that's hopeless, you don't mention it, and they leave them with the hope that nobody noticed.
We all knew that Miss Manners knew everything about etiquette and ritual and tradition, but she also is a girlfriend. She would not let you out of a restaurant with lipstick on your teeth. So I know right now we have room for one more question if anyone wants to type quickly, but otherwise we can say thank you so much to Miss Manners, who in real life is known as Judith Martin. And thank you, Amber Taylor and One More Page. This has been an absolutely delightful hour. And I hope that there anything else that I haven't done that I was supposed to?
You have done a wonderful, wonderful job. And I just wanted to share both books. Well, I got it in the screen there. There's Bethanne's book.
Mine. And here.
Yes, and there is. And Judith Martin also wrote the intro on Bethanne's. So
Yes, and a wonderful intro it is. So a different perspective on things, and many thank yous coming in, Miss Manners, from other people, and they're saying the new book is splendid as well. So I wanted to pass that along to you.
And we still have some copies that have signed book plates in them. So if anybody else wants one to pick up as a gift or anything like that, we still have some at One More Page.
Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. It was just a real pleasure. And again, thank you so much, Judith, for taking the time out to speak with me.
Yes. Thank you
It was
both.
a great pleasure. Thank you so much, all of you.
Bye,
everybody. Good night.